We are in the middle of a pandemic, but not the one you're currently thinking of. We are in the middle of a hidden sexual addiction pandemic. Sexual addiction may not be contagious, but it is spreading like wildfire, and those statistics aren't the ones that are going to show up on your feed. I work at a therapy office that specializes in sexual addiction and is rooted in Utah, so I get to see a lot of Utah residents and see how sexual addiction has impacted their lives and the society around that. And sexual addiction is way more common than you would think, and it impacts everyone, not just the sex addicts. Sexual addiction is common in Utah specifically because we are shunning sex addicts and treating sex like a taboo. And we need to change the current stigma that we as Utah citizens have on sex as a whole. Now, I'm going to explain why sexual addiction is even an issue and how we need to combat that by talking about sex with our children and talking more openly about sexual addiction specifically. Now, you're probably wondering what sexual addiction is and why it's even an issue. Well, the National Council on Sexual Addiction and Compulsivity has defined sexual addiction as engaging in persistent and escalating patterns of sexual behavior acted out despite increasing negative consequences to self and others. Sexual addiction has a negative impact on not only the addict themselves, but numerous relationships with people around them. This can cause harm to you, someone you love, and even cause harm to strangers of the sex addicts. According to renowned psychologist Dr. Michael Herkhoff, about 71% of child molesters are sex addicts. This shows that we are putting our children in danger by letting this addiction go unaddressed. Now, there is not necessarily a causation between sexual addiction and child molesters, but there is a correlation, and by decreasing the amount of sexual addiction members in our society, we can decrease the odds of the child molesters that are around. And just like a regular disease, we can't just rely on public health measures to protect us from getting sick. This needs to be a preventative measure in our home as well. According to the CDC, when parents communicate honestly and openly with their sons or daughters about sex, relationships, and the prevention of HIV, STDs, and pregnancy, they can help promote their teen's health and reduce the chances that their teen will engage in behaviors that place them at risk. Now, sexual addiction is not the only risky behavior that could come from refraining from talking about sex with your children. However, sexual addiction is so deeply tied into all those other aspects that it is so important to have that conversation with your children at a young age so they are aware of what sex is in general and help prevent them from developing a sexual addiction on their own. Now, it is all intertwined, isn't it? We can teach our children proper names to prevent sexual assault, and in doing so, we help prevent our children from becoming a sexual addict and a sexual predator themselves. Sex in general is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people and can be uncomfortable for some parents. Well, the National Center for Biotechnology addresses some of the fears that may accompany this type of conversation, including real or perceived ignorance, saying too much, fear of difficult questions, finding out unknown things about your child, fear of the child's reaction, and discomfort with the topic. Well, the main combatants to all of those fears is research. If you do your research and get yourself comfortable with a topic first before bringing it up with your child, then you can be in a better place to address all of those questions your child may have, no matter how difficult they are, and to understand what is appropriate for your child and what is not at the age that they're at. So by doing your research and understanding the topic of sex yourself, you can better educate your child about this topic of sex for them growing up. Now, a lot of citizens in Utah are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, otherwise known as Mormons. Well, according to an article written on the LDS News website, whatever your hesitations or fears, it is vital that you discuss sexual intimacy with your children on an ongoing basis. Well, this shows that even the religious Mormons of Utah have been prompted by the leaders of their church to talk about children or talk about sex with their children. This is an important topic, and it is not being discriminated by religion, and it should be open between all ages, races, religions. Everyone should be able to have this as an open topic in their homes. Now that we've discovered some preventative measures to slow the spread, we need to understand how to treat those currently infected by sexual addiction. The best way is to talk openly about the subject, and this correlates with talking with your children as well. Someone who has a sexual addiction is going to feel shame and is going to want to hide it. And by talking openly about it, you're allowing them to be in a better situation to get help. Exposure to conversations discussing sexual addiction should honestly start becoming a more common thing. More common than conversations about pornography and how awful it is, but start talking about sexual addiction as a whole. Now, according to licensed marriage and family therapist Taylor Madsen, where there is shame and you're not able to talk about it, that fuels addiction. This shows that the stigma in Utah about sex is contributing to the spread of sexual addiction. I know some listeners might be thinking, well, why should I personally be talking with these people about sexual addiction? It doesn't even affect me. And that's a whole different ballpark than teaching your children. Well, I agree, but honestly, this needs to be an open topic in general because it is not only impacting numerous relationships, but it has direct correlation with the safety of our society. And of course, no single person can prevent sexual addiction, but the more comfortable Utah citizens become with talking about it, the more healing can be done to cure a state of this debilitating disease. Sexual addiction is an issue, and we need to combat this virus in a different way than if it was a physical sickness. The best cure is communication, and not only with young minds, but also with those who are already sick. By talking with our children about sex at a young age and talking more openly about sexual addiction, we can provide our own version of a vaccine for this outbreak. Sexual addiction is a real issue, and we need to start taking our recovery efforts seriously if we have any hope of destroying the current views and stigmas that Utah has on this topic of sex in general. We are sitting here so worried about protecting ourselves from the visible disease of coronavirus that we are blatantly ignoring a virus that has infected millions of people in America alone. The sickening disease of sexual addiction.